maybe an outlet that hasn't worked for years or a light that flickers, is there anything that you have any concerns or anything that isn't working that I should be aware of? And so like when I bring that up, even if they've forgotten about it, it jogs their memory. Like, oh yeah, we have that outlet over in that room. That hasn't worked for years, And so like I'm initiating that thought process and I'm bringing that up versus finding it on the back end and then being like, oh yeah, we've never worried about that.
Welcome to the Waste No Day podcast, a podcast specifically for and about the home services industry as it relates to plumbing, heating, air conditioning, and electrical. More than a podcast, Waste No Day is a credo, a determination, a mindset. It is a never-ending discipline. It is a refuse to lose pursuit. It is a wake-up call every morning to waste no day. Now here's your hosts, Brian Burton and Nate Minnick.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the Waste No Day podcast. Your hosts Nate and Brian are hanging out with you once again, and we're excited to bring to you another two-part episode. This time, we're going to be focusing in on the electrical safety inspection. But for those of you who are interested in more, these concepts will be universal in terms of dealing with plumbing inspections and HVAC inspections as well. And we are excited to invite back to the show for his three-peat and first-time two-part episode, Mr. James Mellinger. He will be joining us to talk about his expertise and how he has somehow managed to track to $2.8 million in inspections. But before we do that, we're going to break down the ideas for you ourselves and turn to Brian for our quote.
There are no limits to what you can accomplish, except the limits you place on your own thinking. Brian Tracy.
Okay.
Had to be a Brian Tracy quote for this is basically just a straight up selling episode,
It is. Well, both episodes.
Wait till you see who's next week. It's Tom Hopkins. I'm just going to tell you. It's Tom Hopkins. Episode
107.
No, I mean Tom Hopkins episode on the Waste No Day podcast. That was probably in the 30s.
Yeah, that's good. That goes back a ways.
Yeah. All right, we'll get that worked out.
Well, in the meantime, what we'd like to work out here is the general principles of what we're talking about today, and that is the inspection. Now, many of you in the trades, whether you're HVAC tech, a plumber, or an electrician, are familiar with the concept of a tune-up or a maintenance or an inspection. And yet, what is your perspective of it? Is it valuable? Is there worth to it? Or do you just pass it off as something that gets done when nothing else is going wrong?
Oh, man. That is the mindset of so many people in the industry, is that to open the iPad or whatever and see a maintenance call pop up, you just think, oh, we had a little schedule to fill, so let me go knock this thing out and hope there's a no cool leaking water heater, water in the panel, whatever next. You're really doing yourself a disservice there.
Right. And that type of mentality is one of the things we want to kind of contend against in this episode, because there is a lot of value, specifically $2.8 million of value in Jamie's case, to taking these seriously.
$2.8 million he's on track for. Residential service, 100% maintenance calls. He doesn't even want any other kind of calls. He likes to go in. He has his process down. He knows what exact conversations he's having with the client. And, he's, I don't know what he is, probably sells something on half of his calls. But when you're running maintenance calls, you can run 4 or 5 in a day, and they're not very difficult to find. Now, if you're a one-man electrical shop or 2-truck shop or whatever, and you don't have a ton of clients, maintenance calls aren't falling out of the tree. But if you're an electrical division that has an HVAC division, well, there's just a whole market of people who have probably never had an electrician at their house, and you can offer a complimentary inspection to.
And really, even the concept of electrical inspection is, for some people probably foreign. I mean, if I had to rank them in terms of popularity, obviously HVAC has cornered the market on annual maintenance. It's just kind of built in. When you buy as a piece of equipment, you are expected to get it tuned up or maintained once or twice a year. And I think even plumbing has a little bit, maybe coming in at number 2 there with the water heater piece and getting it flushed and, just doing a check on the emergency shutoffs and stuff. But the electrical safety inspection, I think, is one of those ideas that is not really taken hold. In fact, our personal experience is that many of our clients don't even understand necessarily what it is or the value of what it brings. And so that's problem number 1, the educational piece. Once you get over that, there is really so much to be offered and taken advantage of by a client in the home when they are feeling more peace of mind because they know whatever is laying behind the walls, whatever the wires are, the outlets, receptacles, all the things that are just kind of annoying that they don't ever deal with, not to mention any type of significant safety hazards, have been addressed. And they feel much better about knowing that their system is working as it is supposed to. And I don't think it's that much of a jump to translate from the HVAC maintenance mindset into the other trades. And that's something that I think as a whole, the trades needs to focus on and continue developing. And if you are one of those 1 or 2 man shops that Brian mentioned there, this is something that I think you should absolutely be investing in. It is a great way to not only retain your clients in terms of continuing to build value year over year, but it also helps you in the shoulder seasons or whatever downturns that your business ebb and flow has. It gives you the opportunity to kind of fill in some of those gaps. And of course, as you're going to find out here with our conversation with Jamie, there is also significant value to be had in your business as well.
I want to apologize up front because I've got, I don't know what's going on with me. It's a little cold or something. Allergies. I don't know. Throat's a little raspy for this. But I wanted to read a recent review from electrical, I guess, contractor. It kind of cuts the name in half on the Apple podcast. He said, from tech to owner, hands down, one of the best podcasts I've ever heard if you're in the home service space. Well, let's just remove that if you're in the home service space part because it's just one of the best podcasts out there. Come on.
Is that in the review?
Knock that off. Sorry. Back to quote. I got started in the trades in 2003 with my dad. I've run thousands of calls in my career and am the CEO of an electrical shop. I have a lot of sales experience, and this podcast is such a wealth of knowledge and resource to techs running calls, service managers, and owners. I listen to it religiously and highly recommend this podcast. 5-star. Thank you, Mister Electric. Awesome review.
Mr. Electric?
Yeah.
That is awesome. Thank you, sir. We appreciate that. And of course, we hope that we continue to deliver on that promise. And we're going to do that right now without further ado by putting Mr. James Mellinger in your passenger seat. Our guest today is James Mellinger. He joins us for the 3rd time to be on our podcast. James, or Jamie as we affectionately call him around here, is a service electrician with Mister Sparky Electric in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. He came out of high school and tried to get into the trades through a family connection, eventually taking an apprenticeship class and learning the skills. Originally, he joined us on the HVAC side and eventually transferred over into the sister company, Mister Sparky, where he found his niche in the service industry. As a self-proclaimed amateur in selling communications, James graduated the School of Hard Knocks to eventually become one of the highest producing panel sales electricians in the nation. Today, James joins us to share about his ideas of the electrical and safety inspection, and we are excited to welcome to the show. Welcome here, Jamie.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Great to have you. Again.
Yeah.
3rd time's a charm, baby.
Yeah, I appreciate it, guys.
Why would we have one service tech on 3 times out of a year and a half of episodes? Is it because we're out of guests? Where's the cricket sound? No, it's because Jamie continues to break records, continues to do things that we don't see. I mean, we're in a network with 200 and something residential service electrical companies, and nobody does what Jamie does. He's tracking $2.8 million in revenue this year with 100% maintenance calls.
Yeah.
Zero service calls,
Freakish.
Zero estimates.
Freakish.
Maintenance only, tracking $2.8 million in 2022 in the quote-unquote recession where all the other techs tell us nonstop people just don't want to spend money right now.
Truly an anomaly, Jamie, and that's why we wanted to have you back on the show today to really understand what is it that makes you tick and this entire process work, because I feel like there's going to be quite a few doubters that say that it can't be real.
Yeah. It's really just been sticking to a process that we've seen work, and just doubling down on the fact of like continuously getting better, focusing on, where I'm putting my training, my timing, my effort. A big thing with the maintenance is it starts with your outlook on it. I think in the trades, most people look at a maintenance of like, just go in, get it done. Like they're a waste of time. And so if that's how you're looking at it, you're never going to get anything more out of it than that. So the heart of where it starts is you got to change your thought process. And sometimes all that takes is someone doing it better than what you're doing it. Kind of who was the guy that broke the 4-minute mile or whatever it was?
Yeah.
After he did that, how many other people followed?
Eric Banner, I think.
Yeah.
No, that was, isn't that the Incredible Hulk? That's Bruce Banner.
I believe you're right on that.
Yeah. No, what was his name?
I have no idea. We could look at
Roger Bannister.
I was close.
But like
He was a rapper. No, that was David Banner. Sorry. Go ahead. Anyway, where were we?
Yeah, it all just goes back to you got to change your thought process of the way you look at the maintenance. And the way that I personally view a maintenance is someone is literally asking you to come in and make sure their entire home is running properly and most efficiently and is safe, specifically with an electrical stuff. The same thing applies to plumbing or HVAC. Like they are literally inviting you in to go through their system. I don't know what gets better than that.
It's what we call a paradigm shift, Jamie, where the same thing is occurring, but people are looking at it from different angles.
Yeah.
And that makes all the difference in the world. And before we lose too many people to, this is just another electrician, the concepts that we're going to be talking about today are universal. So whether you're an HVAC tech doing your AC and furnace and heating tune-ups, or whether you're a plumber doing the water heater flush and the kind of the general once-over, the whole plumbing system, these ideas, these strategies, these conversation points, they are universal for what is taking place in the home, which is basically a safety check, a condition check, a health report, you name it. The same idea is going on, and that's what we're excited to jump into today. But before we do that, it has been well over a year since you've been on the podcast, and we've gained quite a few listeners since then. And for the sake of them, and perhaps a reintroduction for those who are already a little familiar with you, why don't you tell us how you got into the trades and what's your story?
Yeah. So we can dive in as deep as you want with that, but started in 2010, graduating high school, started working for an electrical contractor doing commercial industrial work, went through the apprenticeship program starting there. So yeah, right out of high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. My family had been in the trades, so kind of figured we'll start there and see what I want to do till I figure out actually what I want to do with my life. So did that for a little bit. From that point, went back to school for electrical engineering, and pretty quickly found out that like sitting behind a desk is not for me. It's just that style of work. It just wasn't what I wanted out of life. And so when we started looking, I got an opportunity to come work for the 1 Hour guys. I interviewed for electrical, but they had no spot open for electrical at the time. They kind of gave me a couple options if I could either, going back to options, I could start now and just work in the HVAC department. I could, wait until they had something open up, or I could go look somewhere else. And I knew this is the company I wanted to be at from what the research I had done. And so I decided I'm going to get started here. Worked for 1 hour install for about 3-4 months. And they ended up having enough of work and slots opened up in the electrical side. So I made a transition over. At that point, that was a pretty tough time for me because I was tossed right into a truck. We don't have the type of training that we have here now. So it was basically I'm on call, I'm running everything, I'm having to learn pricing, I'm having to learn how to communicate with clients, I'm having to learn the electrical trade still at that point. So that first year and a half, there was a lot of growing pains. But I'm stronger because of it. I mean, came out of that real well. Yeah.
Fortunate for both of us, I believe, in terms of the company and yourself. And so that has been quite the journey in getting to where you are now. And you mentioned that our training and the things that we do to onboard people is a little different.
Yeah,
So we're happy we've made some evolution there.
It's been way better.
How long were you here before you switched over to like a selling mindset?
That was 3 years.
So you were here apprenticing for...
I mean, I wouldn't even really call it apprenticing because I was tossed right out into a truck.
Nice. I love it. Throw them to the wolves, baby.
That's literally how I felt. I mean, I was up for the challenge. It wasn't like I was doing something that like I was forced to do or anything. The opportunity came up, but I had a lot of electrical skill that I needed to learn to even feel sound in that. So my first year and a half, maybe even 2 years, like the gut-wrenching feeling of going to the client's house was not of dealing with a client. It was whether or not I could figure out the electrical work. Mm-hmm. Once I felt really comfortable with that, I would say probably 2 years into this company, that's where I really shifted my focus to the relational, the people, and getting better at that part of the trade and the craft.
That is a good point to make, that until you're pretty confident in your ability, it is hard to transition into someone who's looking for the opportunity to upgrade someone's system and show the elective options, and because you're just worried about, doing a good job wiring a switch or whatever.
Yeah, it's the next evolution in that craft and that training. I mean, now mind you, when I got here, I'd had about 2 years of experience, but that was commercial, industrial, pulling wiring, doing solar. That was not troubleshooting. That was not, diagnosing a three-way not working. It wasn't learning none of it was residential. So it was the diagnosing and figuring out what was going wrong it just took time. Yeah. So I would say about 2 years, give or take. And then at that point, that's when I really started to realize like I enjoyed the whole next level end of things. And it wasn't long after that you started being involved with Sparky on a much more focused level.
Was that when I started managing Sparky or the training?
So maybe you were training earlier before that. Maybe that was just the time where I was still focusing so hard on.
I didn't train much before I managed Sparky. I mean, it was rare that I was in front of the Sparky techs.
Yeah, and if it was at all, most of it was really Matt on Wednesday mornings. Mm-hmm. That like I soaked that up. Like I wanted more of that. I remember when I started with install, going back to that point, like our meetings with Matt, the installers weren't in it. They were loading up and rolling. And I was so jealous of the service techs because I wanted that training.
Yeah, I remember the first time he did the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, where he just went through the 7 habits in 7 Wednesdays. It was revolutionary.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a completely different thing than we had ever seen before.
Yeah.
And I don't think I was in a truck for that first time. I was in management, but I'd sit in the audience like one of the techs, like, wow, this is so good.
Yeah. Yeah. Going back, my remembrance of when you really got involved was when you took over Sparky. Mm. So whenever that was.
Heard a funny story about that recently.
About me despising that?
About maybe something you had said to your wife.
I mean, I'm pretty open about it. I mean, going up to that point, I had sworn that I would never work for you. It goes back to the crap that people say, you know, the weak people that are like, they're just going to be grumpy about everything. I had really no interaction with you. I had no reason to believe that, besides one or two guys that were just, they wanted to coast through life. They didn't want any accountability. They just wanted to be grumpy about everything. So I remember, I can picture it perfectly. We were down in the little Sparky room at that point where there was three of us. Scott, the manager at that time of Sparky, came in and said that you guys were taking over Mister Sparky. And the gut-wrenching feeling I had in my stomach, I went home, I was like, babe, I'm going to have to quit. Like, we've got to get a resume together. Like, I swore I'd never work for Brian. It was within a week that I was like, oh my goodness, I was so wrong. Like, I really had never had a whole lot of interaction with you, but like, it did not take long at all to realize that, like, you just freaking cared. You just wanted to see people get better. It wasn't this idea of, like, you know, boss cracking down on somebody. It was that of a mentor that cared. It just goes to show how easy it is to roll into like a weak mindset of just, you know, complaining.
You'll find something negative or make one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had just, you know, I'd come from, I think $38,000 was my best year in my plumbing truck in Michigan. And that was just at a mom and pop shop where they were trying to get you to 8 calls a day, and they didn't charge a service call fee, and it was $70 an hour plus material. And I don't know, I was making like $15 an hour or something. And then went to Vegas and, you know, met Ken Goodrich and Lance Fernandez, who, man, realistically, as I look back, I think the biggest thing that happened there for me, which I recently talked to Matt Buckwalter, our boss here, the owner here, about, was that Ken and Lance were the first people, you know, men outside of family that were like, you're something special. Like, you're going to go somewhere. You're going to do big things. Never really heard that before. Never really thought that I could. Never heard that I could. It never had crossed my mind other than just wanting to get out of Detroit. And I remember what a big deal that made for me. So I was like, you know, and then that first year, I don't know, I made like 80,000 and then 90 and then 100 and like never looked back. But I, you know, what did you make the year before I took over?
I had made, it was 85 or 87.
And you were sure you were going to go backwards?
Oh yeah, like I mean, I was going to leave here, and there's no way I was making that much anywhere else doing what we were doing. I mean, that was breaking records for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you know, and I saw that what a mentor could do for a skilled tradesman who was hungry and willing to work and had integrity, but also had drive and was willing to push and, you know, put himself in uncomfortable situations and was coachable. And by coachable, everybody thinks you mean, you know, I like cool quotes and pats on the back. That's not what coachable means. Coachable means I'm going to tell you some really hard crap to go do, and you're not going to lie to me and tell me you did it because I'm not on the call with you. You're going to go do it, and it's not going to work, or it is going to work, and you're going to come back out and say, hey, I said what you said to say. It didn't work. Here's what they said. And then I'm going to give you another one to go do. And you're going to, you know, being coachable means you're willing to go outside your comfort zone with somebody telling you to, who has been in your shoes before and knows what this movie looks like. And I was coachable. Jamie was the first person I had seen in the Sparky division who was coachable. I mean, it was within a couple weeks that we were like, I was like, this is going to be my star pupil, not just in Sparky, but period. Like, you were so hungry, hungrier than even I was, and willing to try anything. I mean, I remember saying that early on, like, you know, I'm even learning selling more out of a truck because I'll tell Jamie to do things that I had never done. I just think it would be cool to try, and it would go right in there and say it and do it. And I don't, you know, I never sent you in to say things that were offensive or would get you kicked out of a call. It was just like, let's try one more time. Let's try one more time.
It was just new stuff I had never done before. And yeah, your point to being a good coach and a mentor is spot on. I mean, you know, I've had that through athletics and stuff growing up. Of course, like grandfathers and my father have been great mentors in life, but, in the end of like the trades and like, career path stuff like this, it's just, like you helped push me knowing that, we'll figure it out together. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I was selling vicariously through Jamie.
Well, we're hoping to take and channel some of that knowledge and skill that you have developed through the years, and in many ways, thanks to Brian's mentorship, and reveal a couple of those behind the curtain ideas for our listening audience today. And so we want to focus in on the concept of a safety check. So why don't you explain in your words, Jamie, how you describe what you do to a client who would be asking, like, well, what is this all about? Or when you show up in the home, obviously they know they have an appointment, but they may not have the clearest understanding as to what you're going to be doing today. How do you express what a safety check is?
Yeah. So it really starts off like, again, these paradigm shifts of kind of shifting their mindset as to what I'm actually doing. So one thing that I've learned from Brian over the years is speaking with analogies to get people to relate to what you're doing. And so the best way that I've described to people, and this is within the first minutes at the call, kind of setting the standards of what we're going to do, is I describe it like, getting the oil changed in your car. Truly nothing that I do is like rocket science. I mean, it might feel like that if you've never done it and aren't experienced in it, but like for the tradesmen, what we do on a maintenance is not really that hard. And so when I explain that, it's like getting the oil changed in your car. It's not real hard to do if you know what you're doing, but it is very important to do.
And why use that analogy specifically?
Everybody gets their oil changed, or at least knows about an oil change. Heck, there's a lot of people that do that at home that aren't mechanics. It's not hard to do, but everybody pretty much understands that if you don't change your oil, you're going to damage your car. It's not good. And so when I put it in those frames of like, I'm not here to just inspect, with my eyes and find things to nitpick for you. Like I'm here to do a legit tune-up maintenance maximizer, as we call them here, where like the work that I'm doing is improving the safety, the function of your system.
So maybe it's semantics, maybe it's not, but what's in a name? All right. So, I mean, in that dialogue right there, you interchanged several words: check, inspection, maintenance, tune-up, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Have you found that one word or term resonates better with clients than others?
I've been finding that they do love the term maximizers, because we are there to maximize their system. I find a lot of people initially will be like, well, no, you're just here for an inspection. And I tend to try to stop them at that point and say, I'd like to view it more like a maintenance or a maximizer is what we call it. But what I'm actually here to do is I'm maintaining your system. I'm not going through, like when I think of inspection, and I even tell people this, is like when I think of an inspection, I think of someone, like an inspector agency coming through and being like, oh, this needs change, this needs change. Like they're just visually looking for things to nitpick. That's not my goal here. If that's what you want me to do, by all means, I can do it. But what I have found is that most people, they want to make sure things are safe and that it is running and maintained properly. Just like your car engine. I mean, we want to make sure that you're not getting old oil in there that's making your engine run harder, cause more wear and tear. So actually what I'm going to do specifically for the electrical is I'm going to go through and I'm tightening connections in your panel. They're going to slowly loosen up over time. We're going to keep that tuned up, good connections, things running smooth. I am also going to be going through, taking a look at everything else in your home. We're going to make sure that nothing crazy is happening. There's a lot that we can see that might give us some insight into what's going on behind the walls, things like that. And so most clients come at it thinking of the inspection. And typically when they bring that up, I try to shift that mindset right then and there that like, no, actually, like I'm here to do maintenance. It's just, I think it changes their perspective as to what I'm even there to do.
Intentionally.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Because you're trying to position yourself opposite of the inspector. You don't want to be the bad guy, because most people would view the inspector as the bad guy who's just going to point out all the bad things.
Yeah.
You want to be viewed more as the consultant, the advocate, the person that's on the same side of the table as the client, and your opposition is the home.
Right. Yeah. I like to look at myself as an advisor. You know, I mean, there's a lot of people in our industry that have financial advisors. They're not the bad guys, the bank saying, no, you don't get a loan or things like that. You're just going to them for advice because they deal with money. They know more than what you do. And so my goal in the home is to be a trusted advisor.
Is there a certain level of ignorance that you have to overcome? And I don't mean that disparagingly to clients, but helping a client understand what you do and why it matters, and even the names and terms that you use for the tools and the pieces of the electrical system. You know, to a lot of people, it's all very out there. Like, yeah, okay, yeah, you just go do what you need to do. You know, do you have to combat against that? Do you intentionally educate them through the process to help them understand what you are doing and why it matters? Or do you just kind of go do your thing and then come back?
Oh, no, I'm intentionally walking them through and explaining why it matters. I mean, if you go in there and you just go straight to like, oh, I'm just going to go do my thing, it's a maintenance, you know, but they don't fully understand what you're there to do or what, you know, your intent, or even for you to understand what their intent of what they want you to do. You know, it's this thing of mutual mystification that we talk about here, where, you know, making sure that everybody is on the same page. Yeah.
Right. And I think that is a great place to start, Jamie, because a lot of clients are on the same page when any professional technician, electrician, or plumber shows up at the door, which is, I don't know what's going on here. I just know that I called you to fix it, or I called you to take care of it, or I called you to do it.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's more the hands-off philosophy. Like, that's why you're here.
Yep.
And yet, why are you at the home? You're at the home not because something is currently going wrong, although there may be something.
Right.
You're at the home because either they are part of a club membership where they're paying for basically annual maintenance, or because somewhere along the way somebody said, hey, you should probably get a couple of these things evaluated or system check, or just do a once over to make sure everything's up to snuff, you know, up to code, et cetera. And so the client isn't really in the position of, I'm expecting a repair, I'm expecting a fix.
Yeah.
Let's start there. How do you think the client is interpreting why you're in the home? What are they expecting?
Well, I run a lot of first-time maintenances, meaning that Mister Sparky has not been there yet. And quite honestly, a lot of times they didn't even realize they had the electrical plan. And so most of the time what they're thinking, like, even if they are aware that like they have this, and, you know, they were intentional of adding the electrical plan, and, you know, they were seeking it out hard. Their thought process a lot of times when I get in there is kind of, my impression of it is that of a home inspector. Like, that's their initial thought, that I'm just going to come through, look at it, and, you know, either one, tell them, hey, you're good, or, yeah, I mean, very rarely do I run into something where they are expecting anything to be wrong. I mean, most of the time in their minds, everything's working.
Right. And that's the crux of this conversation.
Yeah.
Because you are able to get $2.8 million from people who think that nothing is wrong.
Yeah.
And so there's going to be a lot of people that hear that statement and say, well, this guy's ripping people off. There's no way that's possible without lying, cheating, stealing, or...
I can't wait to talk to those guys on Facebook like I do every time. It's a good time.
Yeah.
That guy doesn't belong on your podcast. He belongs in jail.
Go look at my
telling everybody their house is going to burn down.
Yeah.
Like the angriest, just old school, like fix the 45-year-old Zinsco panel, and like,
yeah,
That mindset. I'm like, stop, just stop.
Or the guy that's like, oh, well, you can just scrub off that corrosion from the water damage that's been pouring into your panel for years.
Please go greet people at Walmart, please.
Yeah, like the transition and the big part of that is like when they're expecting that nothing is wrong, it's getting them in the mindset that like changing their perspective of what is right and what is wrong. And so specifically for electrical, when people have power, they assume everything's working right and it's doing its job. And it's actually pretty far from the truth with that. Like, yes, you have power, but like your main electrical system at its heart is, your panel specifically is that of safety. It's to turn power off. And so when we do that paradigm shift of like your electric in your home is actually not the engine that gets you going. Just because you have an engine doesn't mean your car's good to go. Your main panel, your breakers, they're the brakes of your home. And so we're going to make sure that they're running correctly. And I get a lot of people that are like, oh, well, my breakers never trip. It's been working great. Well, that's good. That doesn't mean that it's all working right, though. When breakers they do trip randomly sometimes, and they do trip, for a reason. And if you've never experienced that does raise some red flags to me that your panel's not doing its job.
I like the, again, another paradigm shift there where you're not looking at electricity as the engine.
Right.
You mentioned it as the brakes.
Mm-hmm.
So dive into that one a little bit for us.
What do you mean by that, Nate?
The analogy and how that,
Yeah.
How do you turn that into the client's head so that they understand, oh, okay, I never really thought about that before. Like, do you continue with that analogy? I've heard some uses of the brakes before.
Yeah. Yeah, I use that pretty extensively. So, when we're in, really typically even in the doorway and we're walking through what I'm going through and what they're, even asking them what they're looking for out of me from my maintenance, we end up getting to the point of like talking about most people, all they're looking for is to make sure things are safe. It's like, perfect. That's where my heart is. Like, if you want all these extra cool doodad gadget stuff, like, of course I can talk to you about them. They're pretty cool and exciting, but most people, they just want to make sure that there's a level of safety in the home. And so where that starts, and I walk people through this, I go right back to the car analogy and say that, this is like your car, okay? You can go out, you can start it up right now, you might have power, but we need to make sure that when you're rolling down that road, your brakes don't give out on you and you end up in a ditch. And so what we're going to do here today is we're going to go through and I'm going to make sure the brakes of your system look good. I'm going to go through, I'm going to check and make sure that there's no cuts, tears in your brake lines, and really just making sure that, heaven forbid, something does happen in your home, we're going to have adequate braking power.
Beautiful. The system that is designed to stop you on the road is in good working order.
Yep.
Something's going to trip before something
happens. Yeah, and most of the time that catastrophic happen isn't, clients in their own mind, they go right to fire hazard. And that's not something we talk about here. It's not something that I'm putting in clients' minds because, we say we don't say the F word. We avoid the F word.
Not only do we say we don't say it, what happens if it's said?
If it is said, like if the client specifically says, well, this is a fire hazard, we have policies in place where we literally, I stop that conversation and I say, before we go on here, we do need to just I literally stop the conversation. It's like, hold on here a second. The way we operate is we don't use that F word. Okay. You brought this up. I will answer your question that it is a small possibility. Like it could, it's very unlikely. But anytime someone brings up this F word, fire, right? I'm going to call my manager. His name's John. We're going to get him on the phone, and we're just going to make sure everybody's on the same page that, like, I'm not in here going through trying to fearmonger and do these things. Like, you asked a legit question, and we can legit answer it. But we just want to make sure, like, we're so sensitive with that word because, we're not going through telling people that. And so we have just, these extra things in place. And when we call John, the conversation goes smooth. And the clients were like, well, yeah, we brought it up, and John's it's that, heck with an AC system, right? If we're condemning a system because of a gas leak or a freon leak or whatever.
Carbon monoxide.
Yep.
Cracked heat exchanger.
We get a second opinion. It's just the professional thing to do.
And John is a service manager, just for clarity.
John is our service manager. He's also a master electrician, been in the trades for, 20-some years. Dude's a top-notch professional. Yeah, and a no-nonsense dude. Like, if you're doing something that you shouldn't be,
he is the type of service manager who does not want to hear the word fire mentioned on a call, even by the homeowner. Yeah. So it's getting him, and it's the same in 1 hour, and it would be the same in the plumbing division, although this isn't something we deal with too much, but where now somebody has to either get on FaceTime and see it, or get on the phone and know that it wasn't said, or come out in person and actually verify that, wow, this is an actual, potential actual fire hazard, because we're not throwing that term around loosely. And if it is mentioned, it needs to be verified by a service manager.
And I love how you pause the conversation at that point, because that's really, again, another shift where you're putting yourself in the advocate camp of the client rather than the big, bad, scary electrician who starts throwing around fire words, right?
Yeah.
It's not scare tactic stuff.
No, but there is reality to it. And so, a lot of people are aware of home electrical fires. And so the clients, they're already thinking that in the back of their mind if there's a safety issue that you do bring to them, whether you say it or not. The big thing, though, and this is the paradigm shift that I have with the clients is in the grand scheme of things, you asked me that direct question, is it a possibility? Yes, it is. But the reality of that is so small. There's so many other bad things that have to happen before we get to that level that, there's going to be way more warning signs. And that typically starts, call that I was at the other day, the outlet was literally had charred. It was melted. The breakers were not tripping. They were plugging a space heater into it. It melted the outlet. The wiring in the wall had started to melt, and the breakers never tripped. Now, you let that go for who knows how long. Yeah, you could get to the point of fire, right? But there were tons of warning signs, other damages that happened well before that. And 99.9% of the time, it'll get so bad that the wiring will melt and finally dead short that even a bad breaker will trip, that we never do get to that F word to a fire happening. And so when I explain things like that to a client that yes, it is a possibility, but this is what typically happens instead. There is a sense of anybody that's been in the trades, I've never personally been in a home that has literally the whole thing burnt down from an electrical fire. Does it happen? Yes. But I have been in a ton of homes where outlets and wiring have melted to the point where they're charred and we need to rewire. Those are the likely things.
I was in a home where the electrical had, we talked about this several years, actually when I was still in a truck, right before I got out of a truck.
It's no joke.
I had a 7-year-old daughter, and the homeowner that I was speaking to, I don't want to say her name, but I remember her face and name like it was this morning, and it was, 10 years ago. It's a decade ago. It's my daughter's 17 now. She said, I don't remember why we were talking about it. She just pointed up the steps and said, I was doing the plumbing maintenance, I think. And I said, is there any room you want me to steer clear of? And she said, well, that bedroom upstairs. And I said, well, I don't go into any bedrooms unless there's a bathroom there. And she said, yeah, that's my daughter's room. And I said, hey, no problem. No, I won't go anywhere near it. And she said, she passed away from a house fire. And I was just like, oh. And she said she was 7. And I went, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. My daughter is 7. And we just chatted for a little while. And she said she had some faulty wiring installed by a handyman that burned the second floor of her house. And she and her husband were trying to run up the steps and get her daughter out. and the fire was so bad they couldn't. And I was like, oh. I mean, I came to the shop the next day. I'm just looking at the electricians like, look, you guys got a serious job to do, man. Like, I couldn't. I mean, I was just devastated. I wanted to take the next day off. I was like so just emotionally beat up from chatting with her. And it was a few years earlier, but they still hold that room like sacred. Like I imagine. I don't know what I imagine. That's not something I can really comprehend. But
and not to interrupt here a whole lot, Brian, but like there's a point that you made there that is huge. Like the job that we do, specifically as electricians, but even as tradesmen and the professionals in the home, like there is a level of like importance there that like, you know, doing what we do is no joke. Like if there is something that can cause an issue in that home, especially even to that level, right? Like it is our job and our duty to at least take it seriously. You know, that's not a fear tactic to say like, you know, everybody's house is burning down and every 7-year-old is gonna, you know, pass away and something like that. But like, stuff happens.
I never got the info on what exactly happened there. I never found out what happened to the handyman. I have no idea how that went. But I do know that it was only a couple more months maybe that I ran calls, but I started seeing things like, you know, vents, water heater venting slightly disconnected where carbon monoxide could link in and there's no carbon monoxide detect. And I started getting way more serious about how I approached that. And I was someone who, as I trained you, never used fear. I couldn't stand guys who used fear tactics because I'm like, the upgrade, you know, like upgrading your system is so sellable.
Yeah.
People don't want old, crappy anything in their home. So such a large percentage of people that when you're just like, look at this old, rusted out, beat up looking panel with moisture in it. Like, when's the last time you upgraded this thing? Like, never. Should I? Well, open it up, look inside, you tell me. Oh, yeah. What's it going to take to get that thing out of here? Like, that's all it takes. And show them an upgrade. Show them a system that works better. But, man, when you find something that's actually truly a danger, you better be bringing it up to that person.
Dude, I wish you guys, like, I wish like people listening to this podcast could see a picture from when I was at yesterday. The amount of water damage and corrosion on the main lugs in the panel. The one was caked in white oxidation, and the right-hand lug literally was missing spots from molten metal. Like, it was insane. And I brought the clients down and showed them, and they're like, well, we've never seen this before. And they're like, but we wouldn't have, right? Because we don't open the cover. Like, you can't see it from just the outside. Like, yeah, the outside of your panel looks fine. As soon as they saw the inside, they were like, oh, my goodness. My brother's an electrician. Let's touch base with him as well. So turns out he was a retired electrician. Yeah. And, yeah.
I imagine just how many hundreds of eyes rolled when you said brother's an electrician, and then you said retired electrician. They all went, oh, okay, good.
Yeah, but even that, like, I called it out before we even called him. I was like, you know, just so that you're aware, I mean, if he's a retired electrician, if he hears our prices, he's probably still back at when he was doing things. He's going to be shocked at the cost of the price. And lo and behold, he was, and they kind of blew their brother off with the price thing, and they're like, we're going with you. We want you.
That's a nice little audit you did there.
Yeah. Listen,
accusations audit.
You know it's going to happen. Like, you know, brother does electric, and they hear what we have to charge to do it right, and through a professional company, and he's going to be like, oh, I could have done that on the side for X, Y, and Z, you know. And so I prepped them for it. I'm like, I'm just going to tell you, like, if that's what you're looking for, obviously you guys know that's not us, but I'm sure he's going to bring that up.
That's the true sign of a veteran right there, Jamie. Well done, because a lot of people are going to run across that same scenario today where the client they're talking to, you know, they've identified a real issue, and the client's like, oh, well, you know, my so-and-so, or I know somebody or whatever, they used to do this, or they do this on the side or whatever. Let's call them. And then it's just like, well, there went that one.
Well, so, I mean, if we want to dissect.
And you have been beat by that before.
Oh, most definitely. And, you know, the big thing with this, like if we want to dissect that call, I already knew about the brother that was an electrician, like within the first minutes of being at the call, because part of the process that I do on a maintenance is, as we're going through here, you know, one of the questions that I ask them is that if there is anything that we run into that's of a concern, is that something that you'd like me to let you know about? And 99% of the time, of course they say yes. Well, yeah, like we want to know. Awesome. Not a problem. Is there anybody else that's going to want to know about it as well?
And you're doing that up front.
Oh yeah. Within the first couple minutes of the call. You know, we're setting that expectation that, like, you know, hey, everything looks good. Cool. Not a problem. This is what I'm going to go through. This is what I'm looking for safety stuff. If there is anything that comes up that's of a concern or that I think would be a benefit to you, is that something you'd like to know about? I mean, I'm getting their authorization up front.
Has anybody ever said no?
I have people that are a little hesitant. This specific client was hesitant. They're like, well, I mean, yeah, like you can tell us, but like, please don't tell us any bad news.
Okay. What's your response to that?
I said, my response to them was, I'll do what I can. But if there is something serious, do you want me to, like, I reiterate, like, do you want me to let you know? Or do you want me to just do my maintenance and roll out of here?
So in a typical service call,
mm-hmm.
where something is wrong and the client's well aware of it, hence they called.
Right.
They're already at an anxious state,
mm-hmm.
right? And so they're like, how much is this going to be? How much is this going to cost? How long is this going to take? How painful is the process, et cetera?
Mm-hmm.
In your typical electrical safety call,
mm-hmm.
don't you think that statement creates anxiety where there was none to begin with?
No, maybe a little bit of anticipation of if there is something going on.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, at
mm-hmm.
the beginning when you arrive there, they're thinking nothing's wrong, so he's just going to do his thing and then he'll go home.
Yeah.
And now you're saying, well, hang on, there could be things wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And the client is now like, well, I didn't really think about that before.
I don't come in the door and first thing be like, hey, if there's anything I find here that I think you should do, you know. So there's a process to this. There's in-house training that we focused on here quite a lot, and that it really sets things up. So what it starts off with is we're grateful to be there. I mean, the client has to understand that, and even like I have to understand for me, like being in a place of gratitude. And so that sets the start of the call off right. Then we go into the expectations for the call, what they're looking for out of it, what my expectations for the call and what we're looking for out of that, what I'm looking to do. And part of then what I'm looking to do and what I'm going to do with my maintenance is I walk them through truly like what we're looking for. We're going to go through, we're going to tune up your panel, tighten connections, go through I'm skipping through this here pretty quickly, but go through the analogy of the oil change in the car, right? At that point, then there's a couple big things that we're checking for safety. We're checking to make sure there's no water damage in your panel. Water and electricity don't mix, right? And everybody's like, oh yeah, that's not good. Awesome. Additionally, with that, we're checking to make sure there's, no burning, no crazy excessive like dangerous manufacturers of panels, things like that. And we walk through, specifically what that looks like and what kind of those brands are. Said, you said nothing, you're having any issues. That means my life is going to be a lot easier. We're going to be in and out here. I'll tune you up. We should be squared away. If there is anything, though, that does show up, is that something you want me to let you know about?
See, I love the tone and the positioning that you're doing there with your words and how you're conditioning the client's understanding of your purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Again, you're working with the client, not against the client. The home, the electrical failures, the poor wiring, the bad receptacles, the backstabbed outlets, the bad breakers. Yeah. Those are the enemies.
Yeah.
Right? You're here to help defeat the enemy.
Mm-hmm. Well, and like as you get into this, like you'll learn to pick up on the cues of like someone being a little uneasy about something. So if you sense any of that where like, that you can feel that unease and sense that in them, calling it out right then and there and saying, listen, like, it sounds like everything's good. If something does come up, I just want you to know, it by no means means that you have to do anything with this. I'm here for you. Like, if there's something I see, of course, like, you want me to let you know, I will. But that doesn't mean that, like, you have to do anything. Like, we're here for you. I'll help give you some advice if you'd like. Use us, use somebody else, and typically what, I'll do, and if there is anything that does come up here, right, I'll break it down into different levels for you. Typically the way that I do that is I break it down into red, yellow, green, okay? Red is something that, like, oh my goodness, like, do it now, whether that's, and truly, guys, like, and this is the way I talk to the clients, is like, truly, guys, like, that doesn't mean you have to use us. Use us, use a friend of the family that is certified and a licensed electrician, use some other company. Please, like, don't tell my boss I'm saying that, but, like, the red items is, like, however you can manage to get it done, it needs done, okay? The yellow, that's going to be something that, like, guys, this is a safety thing that, like, we're going to want to plan for and get done as soon as you can. And then a green is something that's really just going to benefit you, your system, just make things run better. And so, guys, I feel like there's a little unease here, of something coming up. If there is anything that shows up, I'll put it into one of those 3 levels, and I'll help you walk you through. And at that point, the information is yours. What you choose to do with that, that's up to you guys.
So a couple schools of thought there, Jamie, that I want to dive into. And one is the issues that have been long-standing but have been inconvenient to address in the past. So how many times do you walk into the home and there's a switch that isn't working, or a receptacle that isn't working, or a light that isn't working, and they know it, they just didn't take the time, or, it was inconvenient, or, they forgot about it or whatever. Does that happen frequently?
All the time. I think electrical is one of those trades that, like, people are just accustomed to, we just don't use that outlet anymore.
Right, yeah.
Because there's 50 other ones in the home. Unlike a heating system, like, if something doesn't work, they don't have heating or cooling. Their hot water heater doesn't work, they don't have hot water. So it's one of those things that I see a lot of people, they're a little nuisance, and they honestly have forgotten about them most of the time.
And so how do you parlay that, what you find there, like, hey, I found that a receptacle wasn't working. Oh, yeah, it was the one that I knew that in the hallway. How do you draw that into the conversation then?
Yeah. So, again, this a lot of times happens up front or very shortly, and that's through the question of is, as I'm going through, this is what I'm doing, right? So we went through that. Is there, any rooms you'd like me to stay out of? I want to know, like, I don't want to go in somewhere where I'm not, right, supposed to be. So I asked that question, and the immediate follow-up is, guys, is there anything that you're having any issues with? Like, maybe an outlet that hasn't worked for years, or a light that flickers, is there anything that you have any concerns, or anything that isn't working that I should be aware of? And so, like, when I bring that up, even if they've forgotten about it, it jogs their memory. Like, oh yeah, we have that outlet over in that room. That hasn't worked for years, And so, like, I'm initiating that thought process, and I'm bringing that up versus finding it on the back end and then being like, oh yeah, we've never worried about that.
What about like warning signs, like, extension cords running through the living room or across the garage wall, something like that, where you're like, why do, what's with the 25-foot orange cord here?
Yeah.
Do you find those types of things and bring them to the attention?
Most definitely. So those are the type of things that, as I'm going through the house, either like I'm checking in with the client or like things like that. And if I see that, I'll say, like, hey guys, I saw you were running an extension cord. Any reason for that? Like, do we not have enough, like, were we missing an outlet? Was there something not working? And most of the time it is because they didn't have an outlet in that area where they wanted their deep freezer to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you can put that into your red, green, yellow as like some things that we could certainly address and make far more convenient and or safe for you today.
Yeah, and that's where, like, that specific topic, that's going to bridge the gap between green and yellow. Like, it's not like, I know we're not supposed to use extension cords and kind of whole 9 yards, but if it's a heavy-duty one and it is the breaker panel's doing its job with arc fault breakers and, there's less of a concern. Still not good, right? Still something that in that yellow that we should address, but also the green of not having to trip over extension cords and even just worry about the potential hazard.
Sure.
That's where the green convenience and nice to have type things they're really going to benefit from.
Now, Jamie, I have to do a little bit of mental math here, but the quick stats say that you didn't get to $2.8 million on receptacles, switches, and a couple lights not working.
No. Most of the time I do that stuff for free.
That would have been like $2.2 million.
And when I say I do that stuff for free, that's stuff that we wrap into a package for them.
So let's start there. Where is the bulk of the money coming from?
It is coming from panel replacements, redevices, so changing out the switches and outlets in the home, and surge protection. In the surge protector, the smoke detectors, things like that. I personally don't really do any whole home generators. We'll do like a generator transfer switch for like a portable one here or there, but it is panels and redevices.
Sure.
How much solar have you done this year?
0.
How many generators?
Whole home generators, 0.
Ah, cool. Just making sure.
Yeah. I think I've helped someone do a couple transfer switches because that is a nice to have. It's a nice backup, but we're talking, 30%, 10% of the cost of the panel jobs that we're doing, and I've done maybe a couple of them this year. I mean, it's nothing.
And true or false, the majority of the clients you see on a daily basis are expecting to spend money today.
Oh, that's false. They're expecting to spend nothing.
So how do you get somebody who says, I feel like I'm not going to spend a dime today to spend thousands of dollars on a panel?
What they say is, hey, you're just here to do the maintenance, so I'm not going to have anything done today. They warn you up front when you're a quote unquote maintenance man, which I was largely a maintenance call running technician as well. And I'm only saying this for the techs listening out there who go, of course I didn't get anything on this job. They told me when I got there that they weren't buying anything today. And what have we talked about? What is that?
That's a defense mechanism. They're buyers.
They just happen to be buyers.
Yeah.
I don't want to use the analogy we always use because it's probably not appropriate.
Yeah.
Oh, well, look, we're still going to keep it PG, but it's, you're on a date as a, young man on the prowl. You're going on a first date and the woman just goes, for the third time, I'm telling you now, I would not sleep with you on the first date. At some point you go, I wonder why she keeps saying this.
Yep.
The same reason Nate does.
I'm not even going to comment on that.
If only there was a video camera in here where you could see these guys' faces right now.
Nate blushing again. Here he goes.
Yeah. To answer the question, Nate, it starts with overwhelming appreciation for even just one, my job, two, them having me out there. It sets that tone for the call. The second thing is as part of this process is coming alongside the client. They're expecting to spend $0, right? As part of this upfront contract, if we want to call it that, the discussion that we're having, setting the expectations for the call, is I am getting their authorization. Up front, they're telling me that they want me to bring things to them if something comes up.
Hey, I'm sorry, but we're going to cut it short here, and you're going to have to listen to the rest of this podcast in part 2. Don't worry, it's only a week away, and I'm sure it will bring a lot of content along with it. In fact, we're going to get into some of the role play conversations, and we're really looking forward to that. But in the meantime, take what you have learned today with James' podcast and apply it. A lot of great mind shifts, paradigm shifts, a lot of great perspectives as to how you should be viewing maintenance, inspections, and tune-ups in the home. And I don't care what trade you're from, I think the ideas that Jamie brought forward today have application universally. We hope that this podcast has application in your life, and we thank you for your reviews, your comments, and of course, any ideas or suggestions that you have. Please let us know. We love to hear from you, and we'd love to bring more good content to you. For right now, though, we want to leave you with our weekly challenge, which is always to choose to wake up every single morning and waste no day.